Hey, good afternoon, everybody. John Pagetta here with the PT Services Group. Thanks for joining us today. I have a very special guest with me, Erika Bylund. And Erika has been a PT client now for roughly a year. So it's a great timing for us to get from somebody in the field sort of their natural experience with PT and share what the successes have been and share where some of the struggles have been, but just give you a good outlook on what it's like to engage with us for that first 12-month period of time. So with that backdrop, Erika, can you help everybody out and give us a little bit of background on yourself and your firm?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. Well, to give you a little background, I have a partner. His name is Clyde Ford, and Clyde has a legal background and also ran a TPA firm for many years in the Central Valley of California. He has been an advisor for 15 years, and he established an advisory firm in Fresno in 2004. I started my career in operations for an independent advisor here on the Central Coast in California in 2010, and then I worked my way up to VP over the next 4 to 5 years there. In 2016, Clyde and I started our current firm, Point Sur Wealth Management, from scratch, and our goal was to offer financial planning and qualified plan advisory services to clients in the Central Coast region of California. Our firm's business model focuses on developing financial planning clients on the retail side and also clients in the qualified plan space. Overall, our practice is split about 50-50 between two segments of business. And Clyde had a firm already established in Fresno prior to us collaborating up to start Point Sur. And his firm there is focused predominantly in the qualified plan space. Our offices share 3 staff members, and at Point Sur Wealth Management, we've grown our qualified plan practice from 0 to 11 plans in 2 years. And we expect to close another 3 to 4 plans or so in the first half of this year, 2019. And I'd say that all those plans that we expect to close in the beginning of this year were all sourced from PT Services lead. So we're off to a great start, and we're really excited with the momentum that PT has helped us build over the last 6 months.
Good stuff. Can you share with everybody a little bit about how you got to know PT before you decided to engage?
Yeah, I learned about PT services several years ago while I was working for an advisor, and that advisor had used PT's appointment setting services. I noticed that he had a lot of success growing his practice with that, and so when I eventually started Point Sur Wealth Management, I remembered that, and I was looking for avenues to grow my business and grow my book. And so when PT Services reached out, it instantly struck a chord, and it was, off to the races from there.
Oh, well, good stuff. Well, that kind of preempts my next question, which is around more how you decided to start with engaging PT. But can you tell us about sort of that front end experience and the onboarding and what made you say, okay, let's go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I think most advisors are a little reluctant when it comes to paying for a cold calling service or an appointment setting service. In general, it tends to be unpredictable because there isn't a defined protocol for success in the cold calling appointment setting space. In our industry, success really boils down to numbers and having a personal interaction with the lead, whether in person, on the phone, or through an introduction from a credible referral source. Clyde and I have paid for other lead generating services that have been a total waste of money. However, I had the luxury of seeing what PT was able to do for another advisor during my prior role at that other firm. So much of the unknown with engaging PT for their calling services and appointment setting services wasn't really unknown to me. So with the luxury of that past experience, it was really a no-brainer. Just moving forward was very comfortable. And so I'm hoping that with the information I can share with other advisors and my experience, just to be able to share that money spent with your firm is money well spent.
Yeah. Well, and from your point on the hesitancies, we have a lot of people that come to us with sort of that prior experience that did not go well as you're describing. And so hopefully
Yeah.
the conversation you're sharing can alleviate some of that for them, as you mentioned. So
Yeah,
let's
good. I
dive
hope
into when
so.
you first started. Yeah, let's dive into when you first started seeing appointments. So eh, comparatively to what you watched the other advisor do, when you first started going on appointments, maybe over, say, the first 90 days, what was that experience like? And maybe what went well? Where were the struggles? That sort of thing.
So when Clyde and I first engaged you guys and we got off to the start, Clyde just kind of reminded me. He said, sometimes this can take 6 months before you get any traction, but time is important in this business. So just have them do their thing, and if we start getting some leads in 6 months, great. Well, that wasn't the case. Like instantly, we started getting appointments, about two per month. One of our first, I won't forget this, one of our first appointments was an $80 million plan. We ended up not landing that business because their current advisor was doing it for well below market price. So we really couldn't compete with price on that end, although I felt like our services were well matched with what the client needed. But that really kind of blew our socks off. We were very shocked that they could even source appointments of that magnitude. And I was very impressed with how accurate their intel was. So your callers, when they were able to provide information on the prospects, they were able to extract a lot of really accurate information based on their short conversation that they had while they were setting the appointment with the prospect. And this kind of information is extremely valuable because it helps guide my conversation during the initial appointment and makes the prospect really feel like they're not wasting their time rehashing old info. It's valuable for me as an advisor because it provides me with a pre-established prompt for conversations that have helped me build a very positive rapport with the prospect in a very short time. And keep in mind, most of the prospects we meet with have been solicited for meetings by competing advisors at least once or twice in the last 12 months. So we have a short leash when it comes to showcasing that we're unique. Oftentimes, I'll ask the prospect why they took the meeting because I'm curious, especially when they say they're happy with their current advisor. And about 7 out of 10 prospects say because the guy or gal who called me was so pushy. And I have to chuckle when I hear that. I'm shocked that people will still take appointments with such a heavy sales pitch. And by the end of every appointment, the prospect always says, I'm so glad that so and so made me take the appointment. So I know that whatever you guys are telling them on the front end, we're exceeding the prospect's expectations from the start, even if they don't decide to proceed with our services. And what that does, though, is it primes them to be receptive to staying in touch with us ongoing. So if the need ever arises in the future for our services, we're the first in line. We're at the top of mind. So in that sense, it's not just your ability to set really good qualified leads and appointments, but also to be able to give us a little bit of valuable intel so that when we go in there, we kind of understand the tone that's been set for the prospect and kind of what their expectations are and what their hesitations might be up front.
Good stuff. One of the things you mentioned in there was sort of staying in touch on an ongoing basis. So maybe if there's not something that immediately plays out for you, the ability to stay in touch, and when something does have a triggering event for that firm or that individual, you're sort of top of mind. It's one of the things we hear a lot from PT clients is the ability to continue to stay in front of people. Are there specific tactics that you use that you find effective, or maybe something in particular that you do other than just a standard email or those types of things that help you stay top of mind?
Yeah, so, and this kind of goes back to some of the tips we got from your webisodes and your web videos that you've also produced with ongoing sales training and so forth, that I listen to those periodically when I can fit it into my calendar. But really, after the meeting, I really take my time at the end of the meeting, and either the prospect is busy telling me a lot of details or tells me kind of what they're dealing with, or we're wrapping it up. And I can usually tell at that point if they are reluctant to move forward, if they still need to make a decision, or if they are just not interested. And most prospects are very considerate in that if they absolutely aren't going to move forward, they will tell you up front. But I'd say that that's rare. Most of them do want to follow up, but people need time to simmer on the information they've given you. They need time to size you up. So a lot of people are promised, oh yeah, I'll follow up with you, I'll keep in touch, and they never do. So that next, if somebody doesn't want to move forward with setting a second appointment right away, I know that at that point they're testing me to see if I'm really going to follow through on my word, which is follow up with them. And so what I've found is typically I ask if they like to correspond with email. If they say, kind of not really, I'll make sure that I put a note in my calendar to follow up with them in 1 month over the phone. And I'll leave a voicemail. I track that in my CRM system, and then I kind of get a feel for if they like want me to follow up in 2 weeks or a month. And some people won't call me back for weeks and weeks or months on end. But then in month 6, they'll just say, I got so busy. Thank you for calling me back. So usually I'll start with a 2-week increment. I'll call them back or leave a voice message or send a follow-up email to schedule a next appointment. If I don't hear back, I'll put it off on a monthly schedule. And then I'll just put a reminder to follow up with them via email or phone monthly until they call and say, I never want to hear from you again, which I've never had that happen. But long story short, at this point, having used your services for a full 12 months, everybody has at some point or another told me to get back to them in 6 months, or they've all responded. So even if it takes them a full 8 months to get back to me, they eventually respond and ask me to follow up later. Or some of them will say, I just put a new advisor in place. Can you call me in 3 years? And I put it on my calendar, and in 3 years, I'm going to call them back. And it's in my CRM. It's on my calendar reminder. So everybody's kind of on track. But the key is to make sure that you always put your follow-up task on the calendar and somebody's in charge of that. So the key is not to let the ball drop, because even though they're not responding, they're in their mind making a mental note that you did follow up, and people appreciate that. And I think that builds a lot of rapport. So when the time comes for the follow-up meeting or to make a decision, it's usually a very quick decision for them.
That's good stuff, and it speaks to sort of our human nature. We're worried about frustrating somebody or coming across as annoying, and that's a great example of just playing out the process. We're really not, but they have things that are busy for them as well, as do we. But staying with that persistent approach certainly pays dividends over time. Now, you described it as you always.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. I just want to add one more thing in there that, I heard this quoted in an advisor article in some newsletter or magazine somewhere, and it said there's a difference between being annoying and professionally persistent. And when I heard that catchphrase, professionally persistent, it just alleviated a lot of the anxiety that I had about being annoying. So, and you'll know it. You'll know the difference between being annoying and professionally persistent. So,
Sure.
So yeah, it's expected in our business to be professionally persistent.
No, that's good stuff. Now, as you described it, you're making those follow-up calls. Do you always own those calls, or do you use staff to make the calls, or a little bit of both?
Well, I can tell you from my personal experience, right now, I don't have access to a lot of support staff. So I have limited support staff help. So it really falls on my shoulders to make those calls. However, I did find when I was an assistant to an advisor and I had to make those follow-up calls on behalf of the advisor, our success rate was very, very low. And I think people want to hear, they're pitching, your team is pitching me, the advisor. So when the prospect takes that initial cold call and they're debating whether or not to set an appointment, they are going to meet with the head honcho. So they're going to meet with, the executive team, the A team, whoever's the advisor, the one who's basically the expert in your office. So they like that, I guess, VIP attention. So if I had to make any recommendation, it's a very good use of time and money to have the advisor or the person who's being promoted by PT, the one who's actually going to go to the meeting. It's good to have them make the call. And I found that to be a really large determinant of success. Perhaps it might work in other ways in other offices, but that's just my personal experience. When I was an assistant calling on behalf of the advisor, I found that it was really difficult to get a call back or an email back because at that point I was just the assistant. But as the advisor now, I'm the one who's going to the meeting. If I follow up and call, they're going to feel probably a little more guilty by blowing me off because they know my time is valuable and they are typically very considerate of that. So they don't want me to keep calling and spinning my wheels on that. So definitely if the advisor can make the call to follow up, that personal attention really goes a long way with prospects.
I think that's a great takeaway, and what's unique about your commentary there is you've done it from both sides, and that's different than maybe some other folks that haven't made that call as the assistant on behalf of somebody else and then doing it yourself. So I think it's a great commentary and a great takeaway overall. So yeah, one of the other things you touched on there was the webinars that we do, and we work with Dan Hudak, who's our Sandler sales coach, and you kind of jump in there when you have time and listen in when you can, and obviously time is precious for you as well. And one of the things you mentioned is sort of some you gave us a nugget there with making the call yourself versus not. Can you explain a little bit about how you leverage those webinars and maybe some of the nuggets you've taken away over time?
Yeah. So after you've been in this business a while, you've gone to enough seminars and you've gone to enough conferences and you've listened to enough webisodes and read enough magazines to where you've kind of heard every trick of the trade as far as the sales aspect goes, what to do, what not to do. And then, being on the ground and having meetings, you kind of get a feel for what works and what doesn't work. But it's like anything. Sales and your practice and your business development are like any other tool and trade that you use as an advisor. You have to keep up your skill set and you have to practice. And so part of what I incorporate as part of my daily practice to developing my sales skills and just keeping up, being fresh and being able to go out and advocate for our practice and build our client base is to eat up every nugget of information that I have time to get my hands on. And your webisodes are really convenient. First of all, you have instant replay. So if I can't make the call live, I can always go back, log in, and watch it later when I have more time. Oftentimes, and they're convenient. I think they're about 30 minutes or so. So they're pretty easy to fit in during the day. But I'll take away about 5% of the content is new or a new approach to what I'm currently doing. So 95% of the material is stuff I know or I've dealt with or I feel comfortable with. 5% of it is something that's really valuable. So it's like anything in our business. You understand, how things work, but you want to be engaged because on that off chance that you get that little nugget that really helps up your A game, that's what I'm looking for. And the only way to do that is to put in the time. So I fit it in between calls or meetings, or while I'm doing emails, I kind of play it in the background. And typically that's how I kind of garner those key pieces of info that help me step up my game with things. And then also new approaches. I don't always know what a prospect is thinking or their perspective or what they've gone through. I mean, I haven't been in everybody's shoes. So these webisodes kind of help aggregate all this data and info that you guys have collected from all your clients and all the feedback you've received. Instead of me having to go out and learn through hard knocks, I get to synthesize all that down in one webisode and avoid some of the major pitfalls and focus on some of the really good stuff that helps generate good follow through on leads and eventually good clients.
That's great. So last question, when you go to a conference or you have a chance maybe to talk to an advisor, if you could bestow some PT wisdom, I guess, or what it's like to work with PT and somebody considering jumping into working with PT, what would you consider as a valuable share to somebody evaluating what we do and some things to consider on the front end?
Well, one of the things that Clyde and I felt was really important was budget. And this also came from my experience when I was working for the other advisor. I noticed that when we spent more dollars, obviously, you guys have more time. And it's a numbers game. So the more time you have, the more leads you can call. Theoretically, the more prospect meetings you can generate. So not skimping on the budget up front was really important. And even though it was kind of a painful bite in our marketing budget and it's a good chunk of money, because of the way we structure our business as recurring fee-based business, I mean, it pays infinite dividends. So it only takes us landing maybe 3 or 4 clients a year to get, an ROI in 3 years, 2 to 3 years. And then that growth grows exponentially with market gains, additions to accounts, and so forth. So I encourage advisors when trying to determine their budget to spend with PT, really take your recommendation. You guys had recommended to us maybe starting with 20 plus hours. It sounded like a lot, but I really think that we hit a sweet spot with your recommendation, and it's generated a lot of really good results for us. So after you set the budget, oh, sorry, one more thing on that. After you set the budget, the second thing is I really encourage advisors and their staff to come up with a follow-up process, because the appointment is only as good as your follow-up. So as soon as you've had the meeting and scheduled that, make sure everybody in the office understands what their role is with the follow-up, and there's a lot of good communication, because you're your rapport is built with that prospect at the first initial meeting and your follow-up thereafter. And so their decision that they make, whether it's 6 or 8 months from now or even immediately, is all based on their initial impression of how responsive and organized and how organized you are and how much follow through you have, because they're going to assume that your service on the plan is going to be equal to the amount of attention you give them in the beginning with the appointment follow-up.
Oh, good stuff. So you sort of described two things there. The one is we sort of call it the snowball effect. So as you get momentum and the annual recurring revenue and all those kinds of things, it can really start to build on itself and in essence become its own entity in terms of paying for itself and thereafter. And then that aspect of next steps of having a great first meeting is one thing, but everything that happens in that follow-up really helps paint a picture for that prospect of what it would be or wouldn't be like to interact with you going forward. Is that a fair commentary?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And the best part about it is it's so simple. It is so simple to send an email or make a quick phone call. They're not looking for you to come up with a full proposal and a set of complex recommendations at the first or second or even the third meeting sometimes. They want to get to know you. So it's so easy. And that's why I say you're going to spend, it might feel like you're spending a lot of money up front, but it's good money spent, very productive money spent, but it's only as productive as your follow-up. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting commentary too. When you talk about those next steps being simple and then just trying to get to know you, so you're trying to balance some progress of moving forward, but not trying to move too quickly or too fast, where that speed can work against you because you sort of overwhelm that prospect and they're just not ready for proposals or different dynamics. As they're, like you said, they're just trying to get to know you.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
well, terrific stuff, Erika. Thank you so much for the time. I greatly appreciate it, and
Oh, you're
hopefully
very
this
welcome.
helps those folks trying to better understand who we are, really evaluate what it can be like to work with PT in that first year snapshot. So thank you again.
Great. Yep, you're welcome.